Thanks for joining, everyone. We'll wait just a minute for people to gather. Hi, everyone. We are very excited to have you here today, and we'll spend the next hour talking about women's health in Femtech. I'm Dean Andrews. I'm a board member of Health-Tech Build, and I'm also head of developer relations at InterSystems. A brief note about InterSystems. We support over 1 billion patients with our data interoperability technology, and we're empowering healthcare and women's health startups. So please reach out if you have any interest in that. Before we begin the panel today, I'd like to take a minute and give you some background on Health-Tech Build. We are a mission-driven nonprofit, and we're focused on accelerating digital technology in life sciences and in healthcare. We host many events, currently virtually and hopefully soon online again. We've been fortunate to have many leading organizations participate. To learn more, please go to our website at healthtechbuild.com. We are always looking for new sponsors. That's how we make these events happen. If you're interested, please reach out to us via the website. We have a great panel today, and I want to thank our speakers and our moderator, Tom Busby of Outcome Capital. If you have any questions during the event, please use the chat function. We will try to answer as many of them as we can. And with that, I will hand it over to Tom.
Dean, thank you so much. And I'd like to again thank our panelists for joining us today, as well as our audience. We're excited to be here today. We had planned on this being an in-person event, and for future Health Tech Builds, do look forward to that, but are grateful as well to be able to do this virtually and actually have one of our panelists join us from Europe as well. Thank you for staying up a little bit late tonight, Janine. By way of introduction, my name is Tom Busby. I'm a Senior Vice President at Outcome Capital. We're a highly specialized life sciences, technology, and healthcare dedicated investment banking and advisory group. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jen Sato, our co-founder of Health Tech Build, for her leadership. And as Dean mentioned, we are actively seeking new sponsors to enable more of these panel events in the future. Jared McLean for his technical support for today's session, as well as our prior sessions. And of course, our sponsor, Dean Andrews and InterSystems Creative Data and Technology. Thank you once again for your support. Our panelists today, I am very excited to be able to introduce you to Janine Kopp, investor and head of Venture Studio at Takeda Digital Ventures, Yoros Kuzminovic, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Biosense8, as well as Mary Beth Cicero, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of 3 Daughters. Mary Beth, with that, maybe if you could take just a minute or two, talk a bit about your background and your role at 3 Daughters.
Yes, I'd love to, Tom. First of all, I'm very thrilled to be on this panel, and I was excited when Janine joined and she said, oh, great, we're talking about women's healthcare. So thank you for setting up this panel, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. So I have over 35 years of experience, and I've really spent the greater part of my career in women's health. I started out in pharmaceutical sales, and after getting my MBA, I worked through basically every marketing rung on the ladder and ended up heading up US marketing for EMD Serona when they were primarily focused on infertility. From there, I went on to 2 biotech companies as VP of business development. And after my second child was born, I started a consulting practice called Market Sense. It was focused at the intersection of marketing and business development. And at Market Sense, I worked with over 100 clients and did extensive work in women's healthcare, basically every aspect of women's health care, including contraception. So when I was asked to look at this very interesting contraceptive technology coming out of UMass Amherst, I became totally intrigued and made the plunge to co-found 3 daughters along with Shelley Amster, who is listening in. So I want to shout out to her because we double team everything. And what we have is truly an innovative intrauterine device for contraception that will address the fear factor and pain of the current outdated T-shaped IUDs with no strings attached. So I know we'll get into more on the panel, and Tom, you asked us to talk a little bit about our education. So I actually started out in biology pre-med, got my MBA at Boston College and got my MBA from Babson. And I actually teach marketing on the side on occasion as an adjunct professor.
Thank you, Mary
So
Beth.
thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. We encourage, some of these educational backgrounds are helpful. I know we have a lot of young talent and young professionals joining us. It's great to see where some of these educational backgrounds can lead. With that, Euros, and maybe you could share a little bit about yourself and Biosensate.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thanks a lot, Tom, for having me on. Really honored to be here. I won't go back too far, but I was doing an undergraduate at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and studying molecular and cellular biology there, minor in chemistry. And I always had an interest in doing cutting edge research, even more so than studying per se. So I worked with a fantastic chemical biology lab there studying myotonic dystrophy. But it was really my time with a organization and competition called iGEM my junior and senior year, where I had a kind of light bulb moment that we can engineer microbes to tackle the world's largest issues. So anything from healthcare to agriculture to climate change. It was really fascinating what you can do with microbes. And so I took this light bulb moment and my realization that I wanted to do more applied research. And basically I pursued that during my PhD at Boston University. So I had the pleasure to meet James Galligan, a professor here at BU, and I pursued biomedical engineering there. And so for the past about 7 years now, we really pursued engineering novel biosensors. Just briefly, we realized that the human body is really complex, and the most commercially successful biosensor out there is really just one for glucose. And so we're working on expanding past that and building other novel biosensors. And so I'm close to completing that PhD, and I've been growing this startup for the past 2 years. Really excited to be learning entrepreneurship along the way. And so yeah, Biosensate is my current baby.
Fantastic. Janine, please.
Super happy to quickly introduce myself. So I'm originally from Switzerland. I studied pharmaceutical sciences at ETH in Zurich, spent some time in a cancer research lab, and pretty quickly understood that the lab doesn't love me and I don't love the lab. So I joined Takeda Oncology straight out of university. My first employer, I got to manage a cancer drug for the Swiss market first. And then after 2 years, I got asked to move to Boston to Takeda Oncology's headquarters to manage the cancer drug for the European and Canadian markets. And during my time there, I got to meet the TDV team, completely new to venture capital, haven't even heard of venture capital ever before. I was like, oh my God, we can invest in companies with technologies that can change people's lives and really improve patient outcomes. Was super drawn to that, but did not have any financial background. So in kind of an apprenticeship / self-taught manner, I got to join the TDV team as a venture associate, looked at over 300 deals in my first year. So very, very busy, learned a lot from the different companies that we looked at, we invested in. And then back in 2020, I moved back to Europe as I'm based now out of Vienna, Austria. I got to build a women's health company in polycystic ovary syndrome, which is a chronic condition that affects about 1 in 10 women, very underserved, not a lot of research done there as well. So incredible opportunity. That's how really my interest in women's health got started, and where it was like, oh my God, we need to do more in this space. So super happy to expand on that later as well. So since last year, I'm back with the TDV team as an investor, as well as the head of the venture studio. So to give you a bit of the context around Takeda Digital Ventures. We're one of the 2 corporate venture capital groups of Takeda Pharmaceuticals. So we have TVI, which is investing in R&D solutions, platform drugs, what you would consider pretty traditional pharma investing, I would say. And we are heavily focused on virtual first care companies. We define that as companies that deliver care virtually until you can't. So really full stack clinics, especially in chronic conditions, that's where we think we can make the biggest difference in patients' outcomes. And that's what we're truly excited about. But we also invest in enabling technologies. So anything that these virtual first care companies need to deliver virtual first care services is what we invest in. And I'm super excited to be part of this panel to chat about women's health, but also about virtual first care and the opportunities there. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Janine. Really appreciate everyone's backgrounds. And maybe, Janine, we can share our first question with you. Before we begin, I do want to let the audience know that, as Dean mentioned, we're going to be reserving about the last 10 to 15 minutes of today's session for any audience questions. If you do have any questions, please do share them in the chat. We will log them and get through as many as we can at the end. So, Janine, you sit at an interesting seat on the investor side. And as you mentioned, seeing hundreds of companies come across your desk, some of which are being funded and others aren't. And when it comes to women's health, venture capital is certainly going to play an important role. One topic, though, that has gained traction recently in women's health is the lack of venture funding. In the fiscal year 2021, women accounted for only 2.3%. And I repeat, 2.3% of all venture-backed funding across industries. So curious on what impact you see that having on women's health in terms of funding and what the cause of that is.
Sure, thank you for the question. So as a VC, that really sounds to me like a great untapped opportunity, because what we're seeing right now in women's health has 3 of the key characteristics that VCs absolutely love. And that is a large population. So in terms of menopause, everybody goes through menopause that is a woman. Endometriosis, 10% of women are affected by endometriosis. PCOS, also 10%. So very, very large populations that are affected by these conditions. Then we have a large unmet need. Many of these conditions or patients that have these conditions, they don't know where to go. There's too few specialists. Treatment is not always according to the guidelines, or physicians might not be aware of all the guidelines. So there's a lot of unmet need in the market of treatments being delivered better, and also for patients having more convenient access to treatments. So that's the second part. And then the third part is that there are not that many companies out there yet. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of white space that can still be filled. And my VC heart, when I see the combination of these 3 points, I'm like, wow, this is a fantastic opportunity. And we see a lot of new companies in that space. We see a lot of traction coming, a lot of growth coming. And what we also see is a lot of incredibly powerful and capable new entrepreneurs that are now coming in, building these new companies with new energy in indications that are absolutely underserved. So my VC heart definitely sees a massive growth opportunity. And to me, this even feels a bit like the rise just before e-commerce has started. So there is this excitement from the people that know, that get the dynamics, that are seeing these patterns. They're like, oh my God, this is incredible. New entrepreneurs, new ideas, massively underserved, big market. The ones that know, they know, and they get incredibly excited about this opportunity.
Okay, and I'd be curious, maybe Mary Beth, we can pull you into the conversation here a bit. As a female founder and as someone who might be contemplating raising venture capital, what has your experience been in the market?
Well, Tom, I love what Janine said, but I'm going to be a little provocative here and just say that women investors just don't think big enough. And that is one of the problems that I think they represent such a small percentage. From our own experience in trying to raise our first round, everybody sent us to the women investors, and we were like, great, women will get this story. And we had a list this long. I mean, it's a long list. but the women, the investments are small, and they are for products that can get to the market quickly, and they're generally turnkey solutions. So I guess our experience has been that it's not, it's not because they're not investing in true research and innovation, because their investments are so small, they're not going to move the needle in this field. And then when we go to the big VCs, they're like, well, how many women's healthcare players are there? There's only like 3 companies that could take you out. So it's that kind of dynamic that we have. In fact, I wrote this kind of heartfelt letter to the person I was dealing with at Pfizer and said, if Pfizer even elected to make a small investment in women's health, it could turn this industry on its head and everybody would follow. So I'm still hoping for that, because, we think that our IUD is a relatively inexpensive development program. But Janine, you mentioned polycystic ovary disease. I mean, I dealt with polycystic ovary disease when I was at Serono, and it's still not well treated. Endometriosis, we talked to an expert and he said, 40 years I've been working on endometriosis and we still don't know anything. I mean, that's depressing, but it's going to take some big money to move the needle.
I mean, following up on that, just seeing where we are right now in women's health with only 2% of the funding, imagine where we could be once we push that to 10%, 20%, 30%. Just seeing how hungry we have of founders we have and the great ideas. Once the funding is there, the things we can do are incredible.
You're absolutely right. I just like to see the women investors raise larger capital, because we're not even looking for that much capital, but they have to have somewhere between a $50 and $100 million fund to, and the bigger funds want to put in $100 million. So it's all those dynamics. And I'm sure, Tom, you know them better than me.
I will say, Mary Beth, that I think your provocative point is one that I think is well taken for a lot of entrepreneurs to embrace. And maybe I could push you a little bit here. You mentioned, we can't be minimally innovative. You really need a game changer. Maybe if we could dwell on that for just a moment. I don't know if anyone has any examples of what you mean by a game changer, as opposed to sort of one step in the right direction, let's just say. Janine, Mary Beth,
Well, Janine, does something come off the top of your head?
For me, the big ones that come to my mind that are the absolute trailblazers are Kindbody, Maven Clinic, Tia, that have a lot of visibility, and they completely changed how we reimagine OBGYN services. So that might be small to some people, but anybody who has ever visited an OBGYN probably has some experiences from that could be improved. So seeing these digital and virtual or even hybrid models really flourishing, I think that gave the market confidence in ideas like that being worthwhile funding.
Perfect. And maybe one last question for you, Janine, and then Euros. I haven't forgotten about you, but so at 2.3% females being funded, do you see more venture capitalists, Janine, saying we need to make an effort to fund more diverse CEOs and founding teams? Or do you see it as a lot of talk, let's just say?
I mean, from a perspective of finding that unique company that nobody has seen before, finding underrepresented founders, or that nest of opportunity, so to say, is a game changer. So if you understand the potential that there is in underrepresented founders, in maybe not having access to all the high visibility networks, but they might have game-changing companies. And there's, in these spaces, very low competition. So if you manage to get access to underrepresented founders, you have unique opportunities that nobody else has seen in a space that allows very, very interesting financial returns.
That's great. Thank you so much, Janine. Euros, I understand that you recently won a local award for your platform biosensor company. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about your technology, but more so what areas of women's health are you targeting and really what led you there?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Tom, really for having me. And again, the setup here. We were really ecstatic to have won recently the M2D2 200K challenge earlier this year. It's a yearly competition which UMass Lowell M2D2 throws, and we were selected to compete amongst hundreds of startups and just 15 finalists. So, huge thank you again to M2D2 and sponsors Amgen, NPR, Hologic, Massachusetts Life Science Center for really making it possible. But what the event allowed us to do was really showcase the first product which we're trying to commercialize and take to market, which is a novel at-home quantitative, low-cost, portable progesterone biosensor. But not just that, it allows us to showcase our further capabilities. And so as you mentioned, we have an underlying platform technology really to discover other sensing parts, which we can then use to engineer novel biosensors with to address problems in various markets. Okay, it's a bit of a mouthful, I know. But past progesterone, we're really excited to be working on other women's healthcare applications like estrogen, cortisol, testosterone, which is traditionally thought of as for men's applications, but there are also implications for women's healthcare, luteinizing hormone and others. And then actually looking past that even further, we're working on making a continuous wearable monitor, something akin to the continuous glucose monitor, which will allow for real-time quantitative insight into our body's health. And that's what I'm really excited about.
Maybe curious a little bit, Euros, what prompted you to kind of focus on progesterone as kind of the first area to go after? Yeah,
definitely. So women's health, is of particular interest, and it's a motivation for me, really because of a underlying concern I have with fertility, which is a growing problem, not just in the US, but globally. I'll give you some stats here, not to make it too long-winded, but we're seeing younger women ages 20 to 24 give much fewer births. There were 116 births for every 1,000 women ages 20 to 24 in 1990 compared to just 66 today. So that's about a 43% decrease. And we're also seeing the rates of women ages 35 to 39 give birth dramatically increase. So about a 67% increase there. So across the board, women of all races and ethnicities are giving birth later in their lives. The median age shifted from 27 in 1990 to 30 about today. I think this is due to economical pressures and also women becoming more career focused and deciding to have children later in life. Most concerningly to me, there's a 20% decrease in the fertility rate of women ages 15 to 44 in the US, over the same time period, so the past 3 decades. So as somebody who ultimately wants to start a family, seeing these trends of women deciding to have children later in life and these drops in fertility rates, I really want to make an impact in the space which has been historically underserved, right? My aunt couldn't have children due to fertility complications. A lot of my friends have, now I'm of the age, right? A lot of my friends have had fertility complications. So I think we need to ensure women deciding to have children later in life can do so safely and effectively. And furthermore, just to give a glimpse of the poor state of US maternal health, we have about 17.4 maternal deaths per 100,000 births in the US compared to the next worst, France, which is less than half of that, 8.4. And on top of all that, Black women are about 3 times more likely to die giving birth than any race or ethnicity in the US at this moment. And that's much past other developed countries. And so I think this is a really dire space which needs a lot of help.
Euros, you made a comment that I really appreciate, and I think it actually tags along with one that Janine was making too, which is that in entrepreneurs, in women's health isn't an odd duck, let's say, and that you need to take a market-driven approach to assess where are the gaps, where are the holes, where are the opportunities, as opposed to trying to force a technology on a market. I would have to imagine, Janine, that when you're evaluating an opportunity, it's first having confidence that there's a marketplace that would be receptive, and then secondly, seeing if it's the right technology. With that, don't mean to put words in your mouth, but how does that mindset sort of get deployed when you're looking for new investments?
Definitely understanding the market, the ecosystems, and the dynamics in there. Understanding the dynamics is crucial. There's so many differences, especially across indications.
Mm-hmm.
So that's definitely a key part. And then looking if there's an unmet need that then could be filled with the technology or product solution. So you're right in that.
Perfect. Mary Beth, I think when we come to talk about the market, your background is a nice dovetail here as someone who spent a good piece of their career in the sales and marketing roles, which do a wonderful job at assessing market demand. Then we can, identify the technology. I've heard you talk about the lack of adoption and the lack of innovation in women's health technology, and I really love your commentary. One thought that I've heard you share, and I think I agree with it really, is that there's a lack of knowledge, a lack of technology, and a lack of access, which is really hampering growth in women's health. Wondering if you could spend just a minute unpacking, where are the knowledge gaps, the tech gaps, and the access gaps?
Yes, well, I was happy to see that both Euros and Janine were nodding to that, but I would say that the research and innovation is, as you know, one of my hot buttons that gets me all lit up. And when and innovation is driven by research, and like everybody else, I looked at the stats on this, and the numbers I had are that, for example, 42 billion is spent by NIH on medical research. And even though women make up half of the population, the funding for women is, for women's health is 5 billion of that. So it's not enough, and NIH is the real kind of basic research. Mm-hmm. So without research money, there isn't going to be innovation. And I know in talking with numerous investors about Three Daughters, where we have an innovative, completely novel IUD with something that the IUD market, IUDs have been available in the US since the 80s. And the first one that was launched here, Paragard, was launched in 1988, and it's still the same as it was launched then, in 1988. I'm not sure it's changed at all. Mm-hmm. And Bayer has 3 IUDs, AbbVie has 1. And it's so interesting because this market continues to grow, but yet the last product that was launched in this market was 2016, which was just a minor improvement over the others with really no change in design. And this T-shaped design leads to pain and perforation and expulsion, has these dangling strings that are a nuisance. And when we've gone to investors, and actually I was shocked at one woman investor, she said, this is just incremental. And I was like, incremental? You've got to be kidding me. Women have been using IUDs for 40 years, and you can't believe the people that we've talked to that remember IUD insertion pain. I've had 2 children. I don't remember childbirth pain, how they remember the IUD pain. And it's really disheartening. And one of our first investor presentations was to a group of men, and they're like, what's the big deal? Just use some lidocaine spray. So it's a little bit disconcerting because we view our IUD as a truly innovative, novel approach, with issued patents, and, we're doing everything possible. I mean, we brought in, if you go on the internet, IUD pain is all over it. And we found a woman that had done a survey in the UK with 1,500 IUD users, and 93% of them said they experienced pain, and 62% said it was excruciating to severe. So this is not something that's a one-off. It's common. And you would think that in a market the size of a $1 billion market in the US, that somebody would say, we ought to make this better for women. And I guess that's what we're all about. So if it's starting with something like IUD pain, yeah, it's not world shaking, but it's important to women. And we have to start with the innovations at every level to get to the big innovations of, helping women with endometriosis, helping women with, we're hoping to develop the platform for targeted therapies to the uterus, that we could use chemotherapeutic agents or treatments for fibroids, or something that's more targeted and more focused, that would at least give women more options. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
We encourage you.
Pardon me?
We encourage you to get on the soapbox here.
Beth, you mentioned a super interesting point around not necessarily being heard. So that's a pattern that we saw many times of women's voices not being heard, not being listened to, pain not being heard, especially negative experiences not being heard. And that's where I believe that women's health companies can make such a difference and have a unique opportunity to create loyalty as well. If you can create a brand that really serves an unmet need, that comes in, that listens, that delivers a service that previously hasn't been accessible, or at least not in that way, and you truly give them a place of security, of trust, that's how you create a brand or a company that is truly loved. And from a VC perspective, we're all about LTV to CAC ratios, so lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. In many other industries or areas, brands are battling it out via ad dollars and via crazy churn rates that they try to handle. If you solve a true problem by listening to women, to their pain, and really understanding how you can make a better life for them, you get loyalty and you get loved as a brand. And that's where also from a VC perspective, it makes it very, very interesting that your customers are sticking around and growing with you.
Mm-hmm.
I love it, Janine. I love it. I'm going to ask you to write a check at the end of this. But it's really everything you said, because and I think, Tom, the other part of your question is, how do you tie the kind of tech, because our product, the IUD insertion, is done by physicians in the office. And I guess what was startling to us too, talking with a lot of practitioners, they're like, I don't have any problems. My patients don't complain about pain. And in one study that we quote, the physicians, the patient's comprehension or their rating of pain was double the practitioners. And we want to make sure that the practitioners, that there's a chain. It's not, I think so many of us are arming the patient with information and consumer. I mean, I was doing some work with apps, and there are a lot of apps so that women can, know when they're getting their period and measure basal body temperature for fertility and do a million other things. But it's like, unless they get to the doctor for treatment, which, Janine, was your point, it doesn't help women. It's our job to have that chain. And sometimes I get I've been in pharmaceutical marketing, as you can gather, for a long time. And sometimes with direct-to-consumer advertising, physicians are left out of the equation, but they don't want to be. We're as motivated to. One of our advisors is in charge of a residency program. We want a whole educational process for the residency program. We're looking at IUD insertions. They take 15 minutes. How can we make sure that this is good, that the physicians, that everybody is comfortable? And then possibly, one of my, not subliminal, but one of my objectives for being part of this panel too is to understand health tech, because we want to be in health tech as part of this, because I saw this very interesting, it was an application for women going through menopause, and most women are scared away from hormones, and so there's an application or a digital platform that will be able, women can use this to find out their options and tie in the physicians. I mean, I would love to have something like that for contraception, because we're delving into adolescence as we talk about the current climate. I don't want to jump ahead, Tom, of your lead, but the adolescents, when are they making the choice of contraceptive option? When do they need the education? Is an IUD right for them? How can they find out about our IUD? How can physicians feel comfortable using ours? And how can tech be part of this?
Mhm. Mary Beth, I think that's really helpful. And it sounds too like you did quite a bit of work with focus groups and your consumers and constituents to really validate that there's demand in the marketplace here. And those exercises are so important. Maybe as the two CEOs and founders on the panel, Mary Beth and Euros, interested in sort of maybe what exercises you went through and would suggest for other entrepreneurs to validate that there's a market demand and need for new technology.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Mary Beth. But I have to disagree slightly with some consumer trends, which I'm seeing and hearing from my customers. But Tom, as an entrepreneur, finding that market need and that product market fit is essential. That's the key and the most important thing. And I think that's what any investor will look for when they're trying to fund and invest in young companies, whether they're focused on women's healthcare or whatever space. So speaking to that, what was really helpful for me was going through NSF Spark program, doing customer interviews, NSF Beat the Odds Bootcamp, again, doing extensive customer interviews at different spaces, and then being a host company at MBA classes such as MIT's eLab, Boston University's Bench to Bedside class, where we did market analyses, dove deeper into customer interviews, and then Brown had a similar type of program. So those types of experiences were really, really helpful. And just to point to the information that we got, I just want to go through a couple quotes that I got from women that I interviewed. A married woman, 37, from Tennessee with PCOS, 4 failed IUIs, now going through IVF. She was telling me there's only 15 minutes per clinic visit, and my doctor can never fully explain the topics in time, considering the time and effort it takes to do so. Self-learning is a key, starting at the age you have your first period. Married woman, 36, in the US, who just had a daughter through IVF, trying to get pregnant for 5 years. Lack of guidance throughout the journey regarding when to go to the next step. At 27, I expressed my concern to my general practitioner, but my doctor said, if you're not considering having children right now, you don't have to worry about it. So until 32, I did not take any actions, and I'm extremely regretful. These are the types of words that we hone in on. Married woman, 32, from Boston, trying to get pregnant for the past 3 years, now doing IVF. I'm very frustrated with the experience, particularly the lack of support from doctors early on, and difficult to interpret these ovulation strips, which I've been taking and using, paying a lot for. There should be more education about fertility in school. When I hear this, I immediately take it back and I think about the product which we're putting onto the market, trying to commercialize. We're at a great space right now where we're still in this prototyping stage where we can make these changes, we can address these problems and needs. And I think it's a continuous cycle, right? You have to go back to the consumer, you have to put something in front of them, you have to look for feedback, make those changes, put it back out there, continue improving. But this is the key, and I think this is kind of the beauty of entrepreneurship and capitalism, where the consumer will tell you what they need, and they'll vote on your product by paying for it. And I think that there is a sense of beauty there.
Mary Beth, maybe, and Janine too, curious on, for entrepreneurs, what exercises would you encourage them sort of going through to validate market demand and make sure that that there is going to be, as Euro said, a customer, a patient, a client at the end of the road?
Janine, do you want to go first?
Definitely. I mean, user research, number one tool, listening to patients, their stories and their unmet needs. I think there's never too little that you can do with this. Really finding out, okay, what are the problems you can actually solve? How can you solve them? Even when you're designing your MVP, understanding what other features would they like, what other services should be included that truly make a difference, especially in outcomes. So we're heavily focusing on outcomes that can be quality of life, or even also stronger outcomes from a financial perspective, around ED visits that were reduced, or general down the line cost where prevention could take place, for example. So understanding how your solution truly makes an impact in a patient's lives with all the stories that you can gather would be my first recommendation there.
Mary Beth, anything to add?
Well, actually, I do. Even though I am, a trained marketer, I've done marketing most of all of my career, basically. It was very different as an entrepreneur. And I think entrepreneurs get so scared because my background is sales and marketing. So I was not intimidated by that in the least. I recently taught a course on pharmaceutical principles, marketing principles for pharmaceutical entrepreneurs at the University of the Pacific. This was the GW Innovation Center. And this was primarily, pharmacologists and PharmDs and pharmacists. And a lot of them are, wanting to be entrepreneurs. And they were just so scared by, marketing, and we have to hire somebody to do, market research. Anytime you talk to a customer, it's marketing research. And people forget that. And it doesn't have to be expensive. And if you start with really good medical literature searching, the block and tackle stuff of epidemiology, which is free, we haven't spent a dime. Well, I bought a secondary research study on the IUD market because I needed hard numbers. And I whittled the guy down to under $3,000 for this report because I know how to do that because I've been in marketing. But, you just need to get more creative. I mean, it was so funny because we recently talked to somebody that was going to help us as a chief medical advisor. And he said to me, we need a focus group of, 20 people. And because we wanted to take all the learnings from IVF and what they're doing with embryo transfer, because they don't have a lot of pain in embryo transfer. And we want to take the learnings from IVF and apply them to IUDs. So I said to Shelley, so he's like, I think we need to get a focus group together, 20 people. And I'm like, I got off the phone. I said to Shelley, we're not doing a focus group. Call some of your buddies in IVF. The next week, we had a call with one of the big guns. He was like, we got on the phone, didn't charge us a dime. We had a confidentiality with him. We're going to involve him. We're going to hire him as advisor. We're getting the catheters from IVF. We're going to send them to our product design team. I mean, I would just urge entrepreneurs and be careful with MBAs. We had 3 MBAs assigned to us. I gave them competitive analysis, and I was teaching this class at the same time. I'm like, what are they teaching MBAs these days? Because when they first presented this competitive analysis to me, I was like, what do you think? And they're like, this product looks really good. I'm like, what do you mean it looks pretty good? Like, I want a side-by-side comparison against ours, matching up the features. How is it better? And then the second one they did, I was like, well, what, was a parent company. And I was like, well, what are they selling? They're like, what? I said, what's their sales volume? So I would just urge people, don't miss the obvious things, you know, and don't be intimidated by marketing. It's really simple stuff. Who are your customers? Why do they buy? How many of them are there? And the underlying demand, exactly as Euro said. I mean, one of the things I always teach in these classes is you always want to look at underlying demand. You know, if you're selling diapers, what do you want to look at? Birth rates. That's driving your demand, you know, exactly as Euros did. That's how you do it, you know? And I would just say to all the entrepreneurs out there, like, don't be intimidated by marketing. The science is much more difficult. And, you know, you don't need big focus groups. You know, we have probably 6 thought leaders now, and now everybody wants to be part of this, you know, and we're expanding into adolescent medicine. As soon as we realize we need some more insight, we bring on another advisor.
Spot on, Mary Beth. You just got to put in the elbow grease.
Yeah, there's no way around it, Tom. You know that. You're like the same as me. Not the same, but
if it doesn't get done from 9 to 5, it needs to get done from 5 to 9.
And talking to customers is the best way to do it, because we iterate. You know, we had 4 product design presentations to all these advisors because we couldn't get them together. And the woman in the UK that did the survey, I called her up, set up a call on Zoom, signed her on as an advisor. She's going to do the study for us in the US. I have 9 pages of verbatims on IUD pain.
Mary Beth,
so the next time an investor says to me, it's no big deal, I'm like, okay, I'll send you my 9 pages. You can read through them. And my product designer actually flagged everything in red. That was, all the positives were in green and all the negatives were in red. The 9 pages is filled with red. It's simple stuff. I mean,
Mary Beth, it's very much appreciated. And Janine, you touched on, I think, a bit of a similar trend that we've seen both in life sciences and healthcare, which is, are we talking to a patient or are we talking to a consumer? The role of wellness health and is sort of, you know, changing some of our norms here. We see some companies that are sometimes trying to displace the physician, other groups that are trying to embrace the physician. Curious, and maybe we can start with you, Janine. You know, what do you see the role of consumer health or wellness health playing in women's health? And is this a good trend for us to follow?
So as I mentioned in my intro, we're focused on virtual first care. So where the physicians are part of the care delivery in a multidisciplinary setting, mostly in chronic indications. Mm-hmm. So in that space, the physician is a crucial part in the model, practicing on top of their license, so also leveraging roles such as dietitians, mental health support, coaching in a full model. But there are aspects where we can absolutely learn from a direct-to-consumer setting, especially around patient acquisition, for example. Or even going into an e-commerce model where you understand, okay, what other things would a patient need? What other products do they want in their daily life? So one of the areas that often comes up in women's health is supplements. That's something that seems to be very popular. Personally, I'm not that sure yet, given the evidence around supplements. But I think there's very interesting plays that all brands can learn from an e-commerce / wellness efforts. Even if they have a B2B2C model, there's lessons to be learned, especially around the acquisition part, I would say.
Euros, Mary Beth, anything to add on the consumerization of healthcare?
Yeah, I have a few things to say in this space. I think there are really a lot of factors driving more of a focus on wellness and preventative healthcare. Just gonna ramble for a bit. US per capita healthcare spending is really the most, almost twice the average of other developed countries. Okay, I think that's an underlying problem, which is driving people to address healthcare issues by themselves and at home. Political decisions on what, how, and when women can employ healthcare on their own bodies, as we'll probably get to later, a la Roe v. Wade, pandemic accelerated the adoption of virtual care, as Janine, is focused on, and also innovation. But due to the pandemic, 69% of customers which took this trust survey from Salesforce really want to get existing products and care and services into their home rather than going to the clinic and hospital. Also, stigmatized and taboo topics which are prevalent in women's healthcare. We talked previously about PCOS, endometriosis, miscarriages, abortion, menopause. This is forcing women to really try to seek education from their friends and family or from sources, that are at their disposal, social media, internet. They just want that information very quickly. They don't want to schedule and have to go to a clinic. Consumers are really taking matters into their own hands and managing their own health really through a lot of various non-traditional channels. And also there's a generational change. Okay, so Gen Zers get their health information from their physician only 43% of the time compared to baby boomers, which do so 69% of the time. So there's this huge difference there. And Gen Zers actually go to search engines practically equally compared to going to their physician. So there's this huge change of a consumer trend there. And then they're more likely to go to friends and family or go through social media or go to online websites, government or private. Finally, there's this need for personalization of care. What we're seeing is there's this uptick of searches like birth control for me, best birth control for, which birth control is best for. So really, I think it's a combination of factors which is driving this need. And again, the interviews which we've conducted, what we've heard, really a need for education, a need for technology which gives women data and insight into what's going on. Really, knowledge is at the core of it. So empowering women to do that is what we're trying to do.
I need to cut in here and share with our panelists that we are getting a lot of questions thrown our way right now, an active chat dialogue going on. I do want to share that we have some in our audience who are offering, if anyone needs a PCOS or endometriosis test group, would love to participate in those sorts of surveys. Very much appreciate.
Only we had something.
We have gotten a question, and Janine, actually, this is for you. We have a few minutes left and want to get through as many as we can. Janine's first question is for you. This is coming from an entrepreneur saying, when it comes to speaking with investors and venture capitalists, whether it's an institutional investor or a corporate VC, what's the best way to initiate that dialogue? What would you suggest?
In terms of actually approaching investors, I would assume?
In terms of approaching investors.
I mean, I have my Twitter DMs open. I had fantastic companies that I got to know via Twitter, of them just sliding into my DMs. I absolutely love that channel. LinkedIn has worked wonders. When I was an entrepreneur, I really used LinkedIn. And some of the most amazing investors we met was through LinkedIn. So never think that, oh, this investor is so famous and so well known in that space. A lot of them actually take invites and take meetings from LinkedIn because they're very, very curious about what you're building. So definitely cold reaching out is one of my not so secret tips. But also in case there's any networks around women's health in specific cities, health tech build or communities like this, definitely help reaching out. Community events also, but I would say just dare your luck, just reach out, try it. That's where I saw the biggest traction as well. I don't know if that was helpful or obvious.
I think it was very helpful and very not obvious, Janine. So it was great advice, actually.
Good to know.
We have a question, Mary Beth, for you coming in, actually. You talked about understanding the voice of the customer. What would you say to an entrepreneur who's saying, but the customer doesn't understand they have a problem?
Well, I've dealt with quite a few conditions in my consulting practice where it was really difficult and that, they really didn't understand. But and something like, I'm thinking of Horizon Pharma and their recent, Tom, you probably know, I think they've done such an effective job. But if the patient doesn't understand there's a problem, then it's an educational, I mean, for example, I did a lot of work years ago on pediatric growth hormone, and a lot of parents just would say, my kid's short, and it would take so long to get evaluated that they miss the opportunity and the growth spurt. So it's a long haul from a marketing standpoint, but the best thing to do in a condition where the patients don't understand they have a problem is get with the thought leader and beat the drum.
Perfect. I think we have time for 2 more quick questions here. Again, coming from the audience. So unpacking digital health, we see a variety of software platforms, devices, drugs, and other permutations of digital technologies. But the question is, are there specific technologies that you see best fit for women's health? I'll open it up to the group.
I'll just chime in real quick. I'd love for more contraception-focused technologies to be out there on the market. Mary Beth, fantastic.
Thank you, Euros.
But, I think as we're seeing the political climate impact this space drastically, women just need more options. So hormone-free contraception options and just monitoring, their fertility and their menstrual cycles better. So
I think that's a good one myself. I would add in there, I would also mention we're developing non-hormonal because we know women want non-hormonal. I have complete respect for women and women as consumers and women as patients. They're smart. We just have to arm them and because we're dealing with a healthy audience with contraception, we don't take that for granted. And anything that will improve their lives, and I'm totally with Euros and Janine too. I mean, knowledge is power. And, to the extent we can arm them, I guess the only thing I would say adding to that is, I love my OBGYN. I've loved every OBGYN I've had. And, the doctors are critical, and we have to make sure that they're part of this process because the women can't get treatment without someone to give them the therapies. And a lot of times they're not getting the respect and recognition they deserve. And I just feel strongly about that. OBGYNs are the specialists for women. I'm not going to go to a PCP, and my daughter doesn't go to a PCP. And I know there are areas of this country and there are good PCPs out there, but let's go to the specialists. Let's get the top care for women and let's arm them with good information. And when they get to the doctor, let's make sure that the doctor is well trained and can deliver medical care in the appropriate fashion.
We're going to go around very quickly if we can. We have one last question here. So while there is much progress to be made in women's health, one thing I think we can now take a little bit of resolve in is, according to a recent McKinsey report, women's health funding has risen from next to nothing in 2008 to almost 2.5 billion at the close of 2021. And the question here is, well, it seems like we're running on a nice trajectory here. What do you think could be one of the greatest hindrances or hurdles for women's health to advance? What stands in our face for making progress? If we can go around quickly to the panel, that'd be great. Janine, maybe we can start with you.
That's a difficult question to go around quickly. I would say for VCs really to understand what an incredible opportunity this is. As I said, large population, large unmet need, and they are looking for solutions online. So understanding the massive potential that there is in a market, finding these new companies, finding these new entrepreneurs, and funding them.
Fantastic. Euros?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to support. I think that's the biggest hurdle. So not just from VCs, we have to remember a lot of support comes from the government, also supporting academic institutions and groups which are doing research in that space, which can take that technology into the consumer space. But these results are really exciting. I think the consumer has spoken and they'll continue to speak, and VCs will frankly just be chasing the money. So yeah.
Great. Maybe Mary Beth, maybe you can close us out.
Okay. Tom, did you say from 2008 to 20?
From 2008 to 2021, we went from 0 recorded venture fundings in women's health to 2.5 billion last year.
I would say that's still not enough over that time period. But thank God that it's increasing. I would just say that the science is out there. I would urge scientists to come forward when we know something like endometriosis and PCOS, and and with the venture companies that form these companies, I think it just takes money and recognition. I mean, I know we want to even go for a National Science Foundation grant to just bring more attention overall. Any attention to women, any money that comes into women's healthcare is going to benefit all of us.
Absolutely. I want to thank everyone for their time today. We are at time. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Euros. Thank you, Mary Beth, for your time this evening and this afternoon. Jen, Jared, and Dean, thank you as well. And to the entire Health Tech Build community, hope you stay well and be well. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Tom, you did a fabulous job. And Janine, you're going to hear from me. You can't run and hide.
No, please
Thank
do.
you to the audience. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It was great.
Bye, Euros. Great to see you.
Great to see you.